This is a Miraculous Ladybug fanfiction story called The Meaning of Marigolds. A plant akuma attacks Paris, drawing a superhero duo into a battle that will change their lives forever. Her name was Mary, and she was a normal, happy 6-year-old little girl. At least, she was a happy little girl until her mom ended up in the hospital due to an accident. She had been distraught over it until her teacher had come up with a brilliant idea. Since Mary had often talked about how she gardened with her mom, she had everyone bring in a small flower pot and given each child a random seed for them to take care of. Out of everyone's, Mary's had done the best, growing swift and strong as the daisies went by, mirroring her mom's recovery in the hospital. She had overheard the doctor say her mom might be able to come home soon, and little Mary was excited to be able to show her mom the tiny blossom at the end of the week. Knowing how much Mary related the tiny plant's well-being with her mom's recovery, her teacher wrote out a special pass with a smile. The children were supposed to keep their plants at school for safekeeping, but she allowed little Mary to bring it to the hospital so that she could show her mom the progress that it had on her lunch break. Little Mary was practically overflowing with joy as she made her way home from school on her lunch, skipping past the park where the older children played. She forgot to be alert as she passed the park, her mind all tangled up in how proud her mom was going to be. Usually, she had to be alert when she passed the park, because sometimes the boys in the park were mean to her. After a small run of bad luck, the boys had dubbed her Marigold, which normally wouldn't be a bad thing being named after a flower, but because little Mary liked gardening and flowers, she knew that the meaning of marigolds was actually misfortune. It annoyed her, but her mom had always taught her to turn the other cheek, so that's what she did. Until today. Today, they had gone too far, and now she was kneeling by her broken pot that had "For Mommy" on it, clutching the limp blossom in her hand as tears silently slipped down her cheeks. She didn't notice the black butterfly land on her limp plant, nor did she notice the boys laughing at her distraught form. She did, however, take notice of the smooth, warm voice that seemed to echo, as if it came over a vast distance. "Little Marigold, those boys are so cruel. I can help you take revenge. I can help you grow a beautiful garden to show your mother. How does that sound, little Marigold? All you have to do is bring me the miraculous." "Yes, please," little Mary answered, and the darkness consumed her. Marinette, aka Ladybug, was on her lunch break. She loved having the ability to go home and eat and nap as she pleased. Living above a bakery meant that she always had a large amount of fresh snacks and sweets, many of which she stored in her purse for Kwame Tiki. "Oh, Tiki, I don't want to go back to school," Marinette said, stretching out in her lounger in the sun. It was a perfect day outside, not too hot or cold, with a light, pleasant breeze. Tiki giggled, floating up just above her charge's shoulder. "I'm not surprised. It's such a nice day. It's a shame to have to go back indoors." Marinette groaned as the alarm on her phone went off, telling her that she needed to be heading back to school soon if she didn't want to be late. Slowly, she climbed to her feet with a sigh. "Maybe I'll have the courage to ask Adrian to the botanical garden this Friday." "You'll have to go to school first," Tiki replied, earning herself another groan from Marinette, before diving into her purse. Marinette was out the door in moments, book bag in hand, as she made her way to school, actually getting there on time for once, even before her friend Isla. She sighed as her crush Adrian walked in, talking with Nino, and blushed fiercely as he asked, "Did you have a good lunch, Marinette?" She nodded, her heart fluttering wildly, and managed to stutter out, "Yep, all good. Did you lunch?" she said, her voice trailing off as a squeak, and he beamed a smile her way. "My lunch was pretty normal," he answered good-naturedly, having become more accustomed to her inability to speak coherent sentences around him. Marinette nodded jerkily, and Adrian had to hide a smile. He would be lying if he didn't say he enjoyed seeing Marinette so tongue-tied. She was so darn cute blushing like that. As an echoing blush started in his own cheeks, he turned away, thanking the fact that the teacher chose that moment to walk into class. The bell rang moments later as the class quieted down, and their teacher got out the needed supplies for the lesson before looking up as silence settled over the room. Welcome back, class. We will be continuing. Yes, Marinette? Their teacher said, pausing mid-sentence. Isla hasn't come back yet. May I call her and see if she's overslept or something? Marinette asked. Their teacher nodded and Marinette darted out the door, phone in hand, and on what looked like a video of some sort. A strange niggling in the back of Adrian's mind made him pull out his own phone under the desk and scroll to a favorite site called the Ladybug that Isla ran. A new video was posted, and he watched in horror as a live feed of vines taking over downtown played on the tiny screen. He stood up so fast that his chair slammed to the ground, causing the whole room to jump and the teacher to whirl on him. "Mr. Agrest!" she cried, flabbergasted by his actions. Adrian barely heard her. His attention was solely focused on the little screen before him. Plants were coming to life, and the riot of green was coming their way. Ladybug would need his help. That is, Adrian managed, eyes still on the screen with growing horror. Nino stared at his friend, wondering what on earth had happened. It was rare to see his friend fail, and to see him fail so spectacularly at that. In the next moment, however, he didn't have to wonder, because over the speakers, the principal voice came on, issuing an alert. There seems to be a wall of plant life attacking downtown, and it is no longer safe on these premises. Please exit in an orderly fashion and head away from the downtown area. Adrian was up and over the desk in a moment, darting out the door before his friend could even think to call after him. He made his way up to the roof, managing to get to the third floor before the halls became mobbed with dozens of teachers and students. Plag! Plag! He cried, jiggling his coat pocket roughly, until the tiny Kwame's head poked up from there. What? I was having a nice nap, the Kwame complained, yawning. No time for napping, Plag. There's an akuma on the loose. We've got to go help Ladybug. Claws out, Adrian snapped, and transformed as Plag was sucked into his ring. The transformation took mere seconds, and then he was leaping over rooftop to rooftop, watching for any sign of his lady. As he headed towards the center of downtown, vines came to life, attacking from every angle, and more than once he was forced to use his claws to break some poor person free of the clinging vines. He was starting to panic, though. He still hadn't found Ladybug, and though he could practically feel that she was nearby. Finally, he spotted her in a small square, fighting to free herself from several vines that had blocked off the usual exits. She was wielding her yo-yo like a weed whacker, as she spun it around her petite form to keep the vines off of her. From his vantage point, he could tell that she had no way out. She couldn't use her yo-yo to escape, because the moment she stopped spinning it, the vines could swarm her. Running was out of the question as well, because other than the tiny circle surrounding her feet, the vines had covered every inch of space in the courtyard. Biting his lip, Chat looked around, and after a moment spotted a cord that spanned the distance over the courtyard. Hoping his luck would hold just once, he slashed through the cord and swung out over the space like Tarzan. "My lady!" he cried, as he swung right at her. Ladybug glanced up, and timing it perfectly, leapt straight up, keeping her yo-yo spinning beneath them, to keep the attacking vines from ensnaring her. Chat's free arm slid around her waist, and she covered their backs as he landed on the rooftops. Keeping his hold on her, Chat darted away from a thicket that sprang straight up through the roof, pulling her along with him as the vines tried to capture them. "I've heard the fae's growing like a weed, but this is ridiculous," Chat said, and Ladybug groaned as she shoved him out of the way of a particularly thorny bramble. "Focus, you silly cat! Unless you want to become fertilizer!" Ladybug snapped, slashing her way through several vines, although they were quickly becoming backed into a corner. Chat caught up to her and caught her eye as he tore several vines to ribbons, and completely deadpanned answered, "That would stink, m'lady." "Well, I guess I stepped right into that one," Ladybug snorted, unable to keep the nervousness from her voice, as their backs met a chimney. Chat managed a dry chuckle, but he quickly realized that the only reason why she was cracking any kind of joke was because they were in serious trouble. A wall of greenery surrounded them on all sides, and they were both panting, tired from the way they had to fight this strange new foe. The vines slowly shivered to a halt, and they remained back to back, ready for the next attack. Suddenly, though, from the main wall, a bud began to swell. A large marigold flower, the size of a human's head, bloomed from the bud, and like something out of Alice in Wonderland, the thing began to speak. "I am Marigold, and I am here to take your miraculous," the flower announced. Chat and Ladybug shared a "what the heck" glance before they turned their attention back to the talking flower. "Wait, so that's it? You want our miraculous, and you'll stop this growing frenzy?" Ladybug asked, directing Chat to get behind her with a hand. He glanced down at his staff, then looked up, realizing that the vines hadn't grown over them yet. Nodding, he moved behind her, one arm pulling her firmly against him as he awaited her signal. "Well, no, those boys deserve to be punished, and the butterfly man promised he'd help me grow a pretty garden for my mommy if I got him," the flower answered, the cadence of her voice slipping to sound more like a child. "Your mommy? How old are you?" Ladybug asked. "I'm 6, the flower answered proudly, and Ladybug felt Chat stiffen against her. This was the youngest akuma-sized victim they had ever had to face, and so far, it was the most potent. Trying to keep her voice calm and soothing, Ladybug spoke softly, since the child seemed to be in a talking mood. "Instead of fighting, how about we help you get to your mom? Chat and I can—" "No!" the flower wailed. "I can't see her until the garden is done. They'll be mad. It's all their fault." The vines slung forward in an attack, and Chat activated his staff, sending them sky high. The vines swarmed up the staff after them, and Chat snapped it back to its normal shortened length, forcing the vines to drop away as Ladybug slung out her yo-yo to a higher building, pulling them away from the danger below. "They won't get away!" Marigold's voice yelled, even as Chat and Ladybug ran for their lives. "We need to find her main body," Ladybug yelled to Chat as they ducked, dodged, and weaved around attacking vines. "Let's get out of this tangle of weeds first," Chat replied. "My garden is not weeds!" Marigold screeched as they skidded to a halt at the end of the last of the rooftops. A plaza lay before them, cobbles completely coated in vines. Ladybug glanced around them, and seeing the river, she knew it was their only option. "Ready for a bath, kitty cat?" Ladybug asked as she started to sprint for the corner of the roof. Seeing her gaze, Chat groaned. "Plag's gonna hate me," before following her lead and sprinting for the side of the roof closest to the river. It was a mad dash, with the vines coming in from all sides, following hungrily, eager to wrap them in their clutches. The superhero duo's feet left the roof at the same time as they jumped, and Chat knew that they hadn't jumped far enough. Ladybug could always swing her yo-yo back, but they didn't want to splat on the vine-covered cobbles below. But the roof wasn't much of an option either. The plaza below them streaked below and covered in vines as they began their descent. The rooftops behind held the same green promise. "Ladybug!" he yelled, holding out a hand to her falling figure. Trusting him completely, she twisted midair into his arms, wrapping hers tight around his neck. For a moment, Chat purred at the feeling. Then he swung his staff out, forcing it to swiftly grow. It slammed into the ground, jolting them both roughly, before their added forward momentum drove them onwards, launching them into the river. They splashed down hard, the current immediately sweeping them up as they sank. Chat immediately tried to swim for the surface, but Ladybug pulled on him, shaking her head as she swiftly tied her yo-yo around his waist. He was confused for only a moment as they floated beneath the surface, because in the next second, a vine struck through the water, missing them by less than a foot. Twisting around under the water, they swam with the current as fast as they could, swimming deeper into the murky depths as the vines drove into the water again and again as they searched for them. They stayed under for well over a minute before their limited air ran out. Chat gave in first, tugging Ladybug's arm and swimming rapidly for the surface, bursting upwards to gasp in great gulps of air. The river had swept them deeper into Paris, and by the time they actually managed to get to the bank, they found themselves in a whole new world of greenery. Ladybug snagged a pylon with her free hand, and between the two of them, they managed to climb from the water, even though that they were connected at the waist. As soon as they stood on firm ground, Ladybug untangled her yo-yo from Chat's waist, blushing slightly at the extreme close contact. Trying to ease her embarrassment, the moment he was free, Chat shook himself much like a dog would, spraying water everywhere. Chat! Ladybug squealed, backpedaling as some of the water hit her. Chat grinned at her rather lopsidedly, his hair poofing up around his ears, before he managed to try and smooth it back down. Well, it's gotta come off one way or another. Although, to be totally honest, I think you look very becoming, Chat trailed off, turning red as she glared up at him from squeezing the water out of her hair. He had never seen her with her hair down before, and seeing it down now made his heart twist and his mind hit a dead end as he stuttered over his final words. Feeling herself turn red under his unabashed gaze, Ladybug straightened up and flicked water from her fingertips into his face, while snapping, "Alley cat!" She stalked forward, trying to squeegee as much water from her suit as possible, leaving a trail of water as she climbed the embankment to the street, determined to ignore her partner. Chat followed a moment later, when he had his heart slightly under better control, although he didn't think he'd ever be able to get the image of his lady, hair down and soaking wet, out of his head. Ladybug was waiting for him by the final barrier, and together they peeked up over the half wall that separated the incline they were on from the main street. There was complete silence in the street beyond, and it wasn't hard to see why. Green covered the walls and sidewalks, trees randomly sprouted up in every other available space. A riot of color from flowers of all species dotted the landscape, making Ladybug's breath catch in wonder. Wow, it's too bad the city can't look like this all the time, Ladybug whispered. Yeah, but where's all the people? Chad asked, his voice just as soft as they hopped over the wall and started to make their way down the street. They were both a little nervous, surrounded on all sides by greenery, especially since they knew that it could come to life at any time. Spying a strange-looking pod, Ladybug investigated, as Chat moved off to look at something that caught his own attention. Gently, sweeping some dirt from its membranous surface, Ladybug barely withheld a shriek as she spied a face peering back at her from within the pod. She stumbled back into Chat's arms, who, seeing the alarm on her face, pulled her back even further behind him. What is it? He hissed, sweeping his staff before him, wanting to poke the pod and see for himself what had alarmed his lady so badly. Ladybug pressed a hand to her racing heart and gripped his shoulder with the other. Sorry, I wasn't expecting that. There's a person inside that thing. I just wasn't expecting it. Chat flashed a grin over his shoulder, his stance relaxing almost immediately. Not one for horror films, are we, my lady? Ladybug shoved him roughly. Hush, you rotten cat. Slipping his baton back into the place at the small of his back, he moved forward, pressing a claw to the membranous surface. The person inside seemed to be asleep, and he felt a creepy chill run up his spine, even though he had known what to expect. Should I try and get him out? Chat asked curiously. I could always use Cataclysm if we can't pull him out. Ladybug shook her head. We need to find this Marigold's main body before we can get anyone out. Plus, I don't think you can use your Cataclysm enough times to free everyone. She pointed up the street to where more pods showed through the greenery, and Chat grinned helplessly, rubbing the back of his head. After you then, milady, Chat said, gallantly bowing as one hand spread out towards the green-covered street. Ladybug snorted, feigning displeasure, but as she passed him, she whispered, Stay close. Chat could hear the nervousness in her voice. They had never faced an opponent like this before, and they didn't know what to expect. Plus, unlike all other times, they were surrounded. Always, Chat whispered, eliciting a slight blush from his lady. They picked a random path, doing their best to avoid touching larger vines that hung and draped across random parts of the street. They had found out by accident when Ladybug had brushed one of the oversized things. It had begun to move, sending out tendrils towards her position. Chat had yanked her out of the tendril's path, and they had moved as far from the vine as they could, ducking under a bus until it finally settled back into place. They had been walking now for a while in silence, when Ladybug finally spoke up. I don't know if we're making any progress or not, Chat, she said, frustrated. Maybe we should try for higher ground and see what we find? What a perfect suggestion, Chat answered, unable to resist. Ladybug rolled her eyes and started to look for a good wall to scale that wasn't covered in vines, when suddenly Chat grabbed her arm and slung it around his shoulders, before pulling her in close and elongating his staff. Once they were above rooftop level, he sat her on his knee, clinging to the staff with his hands and feet. "Didn't we talk about this once before?" Ladybug asked, ignoring her fluttering heart. Chat grinned at her and winked. "Yes, but what?" he asked, seeing the strange look cross her features. Ladybug pointed, and following her finger, he swallowed hard at what he saw. It was obvious now where the akuma-sized person was at this point. A large tree-like structure was growing near the Eiffel Tower. Pods hung from its branches, and Chat bet that each pod held a captive human. "Well, at least we know where we're going now," Chat said, his voice awed by what he saw. "Yeah, but how are we supposed to fight that?" Ladybug asked, feeling a bit overwhelmed by the sheer size of the problem before him. To her surprise, Chat pressed his head to her neck in a nuzzle, pulling her tight against him. "Chat!" she squeaked, unable to pull away due to the precarious position they were in. "You'll think of something, milady. For now, let's just go take a closer look," Chat said, his voice slightly muffled. "Fine," Ladybug stuttered. "But first, put me down." Chat huffed, managing to contain his laughter, and he leaned forward so that they fell towards a roof. They hit the roof running, and finally having a decent target to aim for, they kept going. Even up on the rooftops, though, they had to avoid vines, and several times they had to go out of their way, even crossing back down to street level to get through certain areas. At one point, they wondered if they should simply cut through the vines, but since they didn't want to alert Marigold to their presence, they didn't want to chance it. They had just made it to the end of the rooftops before a large tree, when both of their Miraculouses beeped, signifying that they didn't have a lot of time left. They glanced at each other nervously, neither one wanting to transform in such a hostile environment. Do you have enough for Cataclysm?" Ladybug asked, and Chat nodded. "Yeah, I'm good. What about Lucky Charm?" Instinctively, she brushed her fingers across her earrings and nodded. "I should. If something goes wrong, though, we book it to the river. Agreed?" Chat sighed, not liking the idea of another dip, but he nodded anyways to make her feel better. "Is there any place we could run to, other than that?" he asked simply, because she didn't look as if she wanted another dip in the river either. After all, the sun was starting to go down, and the river wasn't exactly the cleanest water around. Nibbling on a lip, Ladybug shrugged. "I really don't know. Hopefully we can wrap this up and it won't be an issue. By the way, does that look like a person sleeping to you?" she asked, and he realized that as he had been staring at her, Ladybug had been eyeing the tree before them, trying to find the akuma-sized person. Berating himself for the distraction and following the petite finger, he soon spotted what appeared to be a small human form curled into a ball near the roots of the tree. "Huh, I half expected them to be underground," Chat commented. "What? Why?" Ladybug asked curiously. Chat shrugged as they made their way down the roof, careful not to disturb the greenery around them. "I don't know, the whole plant thing just kind of made me think underground." There was no real cover once they got away from the buildings, and nervously they moved forward, feeling as though they were walking quite helplessly into a trap. Passing into the shade of the giant tree, they approached the sleeping child on nearly silent feet. The little girl looked completely normal to both of them, and Ladybug gripped her yo-yo tighter, a feeling of apprehension nearly swallowing her whole. Something wasn't right. They were in the right place, she knew. She could practically feel the akuma slinking around, but the person before them didn't seem right, almost as if... "It's a decoy!" she hissed, and a moment too late, as Chat reached out to the child. The child turned into a mass of withering vines that had thorn-like projections for teeth, and Chat cried out as two of them managed to land solid blows, their thorny fangs sinking into the soft flesh of his arm. "Chat!" Ladybug choked out, spinning her yo-yo and slicing the vines, as she simultaneously pulled him up and back. Vines sprang from the earth around them, turning the once grassy open space into a living, withering mass of green. "Use your charm! I'll keep him busy!" Chat yelled, carefully to keep his arm out of sight. He didn't give her a chance to reply, charging straight ahead at the main root, invoking Cataclysm as he threw himself forward. He had never used his power on something so massive before, And so far, he had never used it on anything living either. He didn't know what would happen. All he could think was giving Ladybug enough time to invoke her own special power. Ladybug, on the other hand, could only watch in horror as the appearance of the child dissolved into a mass of vines that attacked her partner and biting into him, making him cry out. She had cut the silly cat free, but instead of running like they had agreed, the fool had charged for the trunk, invoking his secret power, Cataclysm. Ladybug knew what she had to do, and she refused to let Chat's distraction go to waste. Dodging a vine that sliced her way, she cried out, "Lucky charm!" sending her yo-yo high up into the air. There was a brief flash of light, and a small square piece of paper floated from the sky to land into her hands. "A picture? What in the world?" She didn't get a chance to finish her sentence, for in the next instant, a loud shriek forced her to cover her ears. Instantly, she saw the reason why. Chat's Cataclysm had scored a direct hit on the main root of the tree, and it was quite clearly dying from the impact. Vines sprang up from the tree, smashing Chat away from the root, and Ladybug sprinted forward, catching him with her body before they both slammed into the hard ground. Ladybug pulled herself out from under him, swallowing hard as she realized that the bite marks from the vines were turning green under his torn suit. Chat groaned at her movement, forced him to roll forward, but she could tell that he was still conscious, although barely, and he stared up at her, looking dazed. "Run, Ladybug," Chat managed, seeming to come more to his senses as she slashed at some vines that were coming too close. Wincing, he tried to sit up. I'll keep it distracted." He didn't say it, but she knew what he meant. "Run, save yourself. This thing is too big for us to fight." For a moment, the world seemed to disappear around her, and tears welled into her eyes. He was hurt, really hurt, and Chat was going to sacrifice himself so that she could get away. Ladybug didn't know what she looked like as he gazed up at her, but it must have been one heck of a sight, because he reached up to her, an incredibly worried look on his face. Her hand moved on its own, and the world slammed back into focus as it connected sharply with his cheek. Chat jerked back, shocked from the slap, and Ladybug grabbed his arm, swinging him up like a child onto her back. Tears streaked down her cheeks as she dodged a volley of vines, sprinting away from the great dying tree. "I will not run, and I will not leave you behind. Never ask that of me again," she practically screamed, as he wrapped his good arm around her, clinging with his legs as she sprinted towards the buildings. If he answered her, it was lost in a second ear-splitting wail, echoing once more up from underground. Ladybug used her yo-yo and every trick she knew to get away over the rooftops, and she didn't stop running even when the vines stopped chasing them momentarily. The only thing that cut through her single-minded idea of flee was when her miraculous beeped, signifying that her transformation was going to wear off very soon. At the very next rooftop balcony, Ladybug practically collapsed, dropping to her knees and allowing Chat to finally let go of her. He flopped back with a groan, and Ladybug twisted around, helping him to sit in a slightly more comfortable position against the rough brick. "Chat, oh, Chat, I'm so sorry," she murmured, still gasping for air as she reached toward his inner arm. "Not to worry, m'lady. I kinda deserved that slap. I never should have asked you to run," Chat answered, and Ladybug felt that same feeling of hopelessness hit her, causing her eyes to tear up again. Both of their miraculouses beeped once more, and she could see on his ring that he only had a single piece of pad and one toe left. Her hands brushed his shoulder, ready to tear the sleeve off and get a better look at the injury, but he stopped her from touching her arm, instead curling the injured limb around his chest. "There isn't anything you can do, Ladybug," he said softly, and Ladybug sat back, surprised at his reluctance. "What are we—" she started, only to be cut off by a furious voice. "How dare the nasty little kitty hurt Mommy's tree! Now I'm gonna find you, little kitty, and take your miraculous!" it screamed, and the two of them winced instinctively, moving towards each other. "Did you use your lucky charm?" Chat asked, and Ladybug nodded, pulling the red and black spotted paper from her compact. Flipping it over, the two of them eyed the photo, which was of a little girl about 6 years old, and her mother. The two of them were smiling joyfully, waving at the camera, gardening trowels in hand. Okay, so we know the kid's name's Mary at least, Chat said, his head falling against the bricks as he let out a sigh. Huh? Ladybug asked, and gently he tapped a claw to the photo, where she could make out a name tag pinned to the child's shirt front. Okay, but that still doesn't tell us how to defeat this Marigold, she whispered, as the Miraculous beeped once more. Ladybug, Chat whispered, catching her attention immediately, the seriousness of his tone not lost on her. Listen to me, and please don't slap me again. You need to leave me here. No, Ladybug snapped. I don't care if you see who I am at this point. I'm not leaving you here alone. Chat grinned up at her weakly. I'm sorry, milady, but you may not have much of a choice. Once my transformation wears off, the venom from those plants is going to take over, and I have a feeling I'll be cocooned like those other folk we found on the street. Ladybug froze, the horror of what he just explained hitting her all at once. I can't do this without you. Please, Chat, Ladybug begged, her eyes welling with tears again. She felt useless, helpless, and what was worse, there was nothing that she could do except for watch time run out. You won't be alone. Plag will help you. In the next moment, Chat pulled off his ring, reverting to a civilian form. Suddenly, Adrian sat before her, and Ladybug felt her jaw come unhinged, falling open, her heart breaking in two at the level of trust he had just displayed. She couldn't move, couldn't speak, and without another word, he placed his miraculous ring into her palm, forcing her fingers to curl around it. That motion brought her back a little, and she managed to splutter out, Adrian? He eyed her strangely, a very Chat-like grin flitting across his face, even as he flinched in pain. Ah, so you do know me. I don't know who you are, but I know you can do this. Take care of her for me, Plag. A small black kitten Kwame floated out to hover before him. I will. We will come back for you. I know you will. I'll be waiting patiently, Adrian managed, his gaze moving to focus on her. Ladybug swallowed hard, barely registering the terrible pun. Her gaze was fixed on his arm, his now green arm, to be exact. As she watched, green tendrils sprang from it, and slowly started to spread up his arm, moving away from the bite wounds. The sight was making her feel distinctly ill, and she tore her gaze away from it, forcing herself to look directly into Adrian's eyes. He was slumped against the wall now, his eyes half open, as he tried to fight what was happening to him. Finally, her voice cracking, she managed to speak. I'll fix this, and I'll come back for you. So hold on, because I love you. His eyes flew open wide, and he gaped at her, even as the tendrils swept across his chest. Gently, she pressed her lips to his, and pulled back as the vines made their way across his neck. Adrian's eyes fluttered, and he grinned up at her. Best goodnight kiss ever, he managed, before he slumped back against the wall, unconscious. Ladybug wasn't anywhere near ready to leave him, but she pulled back, not wanting to get tangled up in the vines as they finished cocooning him, and then began secreting a gel that she assumed would become the strange membranous layer she had seen and felt on an earlier pod. A moment later, though, her own Miraculous gave a final warning beep, then her transformation undid itself, leaving her feeling very vulnerable and alone on a random rooftop. As the flash of light dissipated, Marinette held out her hands instinctively, allowing both Kwame to flop tiredly into her cupped palms. You should put on my ring so it can't get lost or stolen, Plag said, when she didn't move for several minutes. I don't know what to do, Marinette whispered, feeling as if she weren't quite connected to her body. Put my ring on and find a place to hide, Plag answered patiently, and Marinette focused her eyes on the tiny kitten Kwame in her palm. I think she's in shock, Plag. She really likes that boy Adrian, and to find out that not only he's Chat, but she has to leave him? Tiki trailed off, looking up at Marinette, whose gaze had locked back on the newly forming pod. Well, She'd better come out of it soon, 'cause we don't seem to have a ton of time, Plag replied, causing Marinette to blink and shake her head roughly. Sorry, Marinette whispered, her fogged-over mind starting to clear a little. Plag grinned up weakly at her and opened his mouth to speak again, when a voice interrupted whatever the Kwami was going to say next. Here, kitty, 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 the voice of a 6-year-old girl sang spookily. Come out, kitty, kitty, kitty. Hearing the voice sent a shiver of fear through Marinette, and in the late afternoon sun she could just make out several vines sweeping over the rooftops nearby. Marinette didn't know where they came from, but a memory of Chat, grinned firmly in place leaping in front of her to take a blow meant for her, crossed her mind's eye, and deep within her a spark of stubbornness answered the shiver. No, I will not give up. Not here, and not now, Marinette said, slowly and shakily she stood. You guys can both fit in my purse when I run, right? Both Kwami flew up from her palm and nodded, before diving into the small bag without an answer. Looking around the rooftop, Marinette slid Adrian's ring onto her finger, as she fixed her position firmly in mind, so that she could return later on, when everything was finished. Slowly, she closed her eyes as she struggled to come up with an idea of what to do next, the ring weighing heavily on her finger. For something so small, it feels incredibly heavy, Marinette whispered, twisting the band on her finger. That's because you carry his heart, Plag said from the purse. Instead of intimidating her, Plag's words actually warmed her, and the next second, Plag asked, Do you have any cheese? Ruining the moment. Marinette managed a weak chuckle. We'll have to find you some as soon as I get us somewhere safe, okay? Okay, the little girl's voice warbled again, but instead of making Marinette flinch in fear, this time it simply annoyed her. Picking out a path along the closest rooftop, Marinette darted forward, leaping across the gap between the buildings. I think they know we're here, Tiki noted, as the vine swung towards them, as if sensing her movement. Wonderful, Marinette panted, and put on a burst of speed so that she could clear a larger gap, as she jumped from the rooftop. She had been awake since the early morning, and so far she had spent most of her afternoon fighting, dodging, and getting slammed by psycho vines. Marinette was in great shape from being Ladybug, but even her body had its limits, and she was getting tired. As she cut across another rooftop, a vine surprised her, cutting off her initial path. Ducking sideways, feet almost sliding out from underneath her, she cut across its sweeping arc and sprinted forward to the edge of the roof, where she jumped across a span that she could usually clear with ease. Her exhaustion betrayed her, however, and she nearly fell short, the tips of her toes just barely making the edge, so she tipped forward, rolling across a soon-to-be vegetable bed. The fresh dirt made for a soft landing, thankfully, with only a few small bruises to show for the near miss, and she stumbled to her feet, covered in dirt. Swiftly, making her way to the edge of the bed, Plag flew up from the purse, taking in her disheveled appearance. Kid, you've got to find a place to hide. You can't run from those vine things forever. Marinette nodded tiredly as she kept an eye on the vines, as they swept the rooftop, still searching for her. Jumping across the gap seemed to confuse them in their search, at least. I've got to get off these roofs. I'm getting too tired to keep leaping about like this. I'm going to end up missing one of these times. Tiki darted up from her purse and pointed out a small alcove across the other side of the roof. That looks like an entrance, she said, catching Marinette's attention. She managed to make it all of 2 steps towards the door, however, before vines slid across it, slinging out tendrils that searched the small alcove. Finding nothing, the vines headed in her direction, and Marinette turned, running in the opposite way, hissing, No time! She was swiftly running out of roof, with nowhere to jump to next. Just as she was starting to feel cornered, she spied a length of cord off to one side that was probably used for washing. Thanking her luck, Marinette ran forward. Scooping it up and coming to the end of the roof, she swiftly tied it to a bar that jutted from the roof's edge. She tossed the rest of it over the side and peered down to see some planters about 3/4 of the way down. Seeming to sense what she was about to do, Tiki flew down and tugged on the cord, asking, Will that hold you, Marinette? Marinette shrugged. I guess I'll find out, she answered, and dropped over the side of the building as the vines started sweeping the part of the rooftop she had just been on. The cord held her weight, just barely, and she swung wildly as she ducked some dangling tendrils while trying to lower herself to the street. The cord bit into her hands painfully, and the slightest twang sound was all the warning she had before the cord actually snapped. Being Ladybug had given her many new skills. Swinging from rooftop to rooftop with nothing but a yo-yo had greatly sharpened her reaction time. Plummeting towards the ground, Marinette flailed, refusing to scream. As she fell, Marinette twisted feet first, instinctively as she tried to snag the wall. A moment later, her hand caught the wrought iron decoration of one of the window boxes she had seen from the rooftop. She held on for dear life, praying that the box would support her weight as her body jolted to a painful stop, her shoulder and arms protesting the motion she was putting them through. Ignoring the pain, she grabbed the box with the other hand and slowly started to heave herself up so that she could peer in the window behind the box. Her luck actually held. The window box, and as a bonus, the window was already halfway open. To her amusement, both Tiki and Plag were gripping the shoulders of her jacket, doing their best to try to help her as she scrambled in through the window. She slithered through the gap, falling to the floor in a heap, and decided to simply stay there. "Marinette, the window!" Tiki cried, waving to catch her attention. Recognizing the danger of the vines possibly following her in, Marinette lunged forward, slamming the window shut, then collapsed to the floor, a frantic giggle escaping her lips. "Marinette?" the two Kwami queried, concerned for the young girl. A lump seemed to form in her throat, and Marinette found that she couldn't answer. Her vision blurred as she stared out the window, and to her surprise, she could feel a tear leak from one of her eyes. A wave of felt pity, fear, and countless other emotions rolled through her. I need to keep moving," Marinette whispered to herself, turning on her knees to face the concerned Kwami. They hovered in the air watching her, their expressions unreadable. Sniffing, Marinette swiped a stray tear from her cheek, and once more climbed to her feet. "Let's get you guys something to eat, and we can figure out what to do from there," she said, her voice soft. "Cheese, please!" Plag cried, making a brief smile flicker on her lips. They were in someone's apartment, and from the look of things, they hadn't been home when the akuma's attack had started. After checking that the windows and doors were secure, Marinette moved into the kitchen and found the Kwami as well as herself something to eat. She felt a little bad stealing this person's food, but she knew that she didn't have much of a choice at this point. As they ate, Marinette started to make a plan. "This place seems safe enough, so I think we should stay out here until it's dark and regain some of the energy we're going to need for this next fight. Plants don't move around much at night, so if this Marigold holds true to that, we should be able to sneak up on her then." Adri, her voice broke for a second, and she cleared her throat before continuing. "Chat was right, I think, when she said that she's underground. So we can probably find Marigold either in the metro or the catacombs." "There won't be a ton of room for you to maneuver down around there," Tiki warned, and Marinette nodded. "I'll probably have to find a flashlight or something so I can use to see it too," Marinette said, already thinking of stuff that she might have to collect. Plag snorted. "You won't need a flashlight. You'll have night vision, because you'll be using me." Marinette blinked, not thinking she heard him properly. "Using you? I can do that?" Plag nodded and swallowed a large chunk of cheese whole. "Adrian gave me to you willingly, and I want to help you, so you'll have all access to Chat Noir's powers. You can use them in conjunction with Ladybug's normal powers, too. Just stay claws out to give me a heads up when you decide to go for it." Swallowing the bit of fruit that she had in her mouth, Marinette asked, "Can I give you back to Adrian when this is all over? Using your power won't mess up your connection with him, will it?" Plag shook his little head. "Nothing can mess up our connection. Besides, you're already a part of our connection. How do you think he always finds you so darn fast?" Marinette chuckled dryly and stood up once more. "Well, if we're going to do this, we need to get some sleep. Do you guys mind taking watches?" "You go to sleep, Marinette. We'll keep watch and wake you once it's fully dark, Tiki answered, and Marinette managed a small smile before wandering over to his little couch and collapsing onto it. She was unconscious almost instantly. Something nudged her in the darkness, whispering. Marinette groaned and tried to roll away from the nudges, only to meet empty space and then suddenly the floor. Ah! Marinette cried as she hit the ground, coming awake almost instantly. Marinette, are you okay? Tiki cried, her little body producing enough of a glow that she could see her hovering less than a foot above her. Tiki? Marinette asked, confused, as she sat up. It was pitch black in the room, and Marinette could just make out the generalized shapes that were furniture. As more of the shadows came into focus, a small pair of green eyes shined out of the darkness, making the air catch in the back of her throat. Ooh! Plague cried, and dodged Marinette's hand, chuckling as she swiped at him in fear. Plague! Tiki scolded, and the events of the day suddenly came swarming back to Marinette. It wasn't a dream, then, Marinette whispered to herself, pressing her lips to the metal band that encircled her finger. Sorry, Ladybug, but we haven't escaped this nightmare quite yet, Plague said quietly. However, if you want to go after this Marigold girl, now's probably the best time. Right. Let's get to it, Marinette answered, climbing to her feet. She was no longer exhausted, although her shoulder and some other parts of her were either stiff or sore from the skirmishes, as well as sleeping in a single position for such a long time. Tiki led the way with her glow, with Pelag following close behind, whispering to Marinette where to step, as they made their way out of their apartment and to the main stairs. How long was I asleep for? Marinette asked, as she began to feel her way up the stairs. About 8 hours, Tiki answered, causing Marinette to stumble. 8? Marinette cried. Why in the world did you let me sleep that long? Besides the fact that you needed the rest, Plague quipped dryly. This akuma has been on the loose since lunch. Yesterday now. It's never taken us this long to wrap up a capture before, Marinette hissed, worried for the people of Paris, especially those that had been cocooned. It's not like you could help it. Plus, the vines really only stopped moving about 2 hours ago. Your body and mind needed to recover from the shocks it received. Also, now's the best time to move about if you're the creature of the night, Plague grumbled. Yeah, well, I'm not exactly a creature of the night either, Marinette whisper screamed in his direction, since she couldn't actually see where he was. You will be once you go through that door, Plague retorted, and received a scolding hiss from Tiki as they arrived at the rooftop exit. We're with you all the way, Marinette, Tiki whispered, placing a gentle kiss on her chosen's nose. Trust your gut. You'll be okay, Plague said, his green eyes hovering creepily out of place in the darkness. Okay, I can do this, Marinette whispered to herself, the very air around her changing as she focused. Tiki, Plague, spots on and claws out. Closing her eyes as the transformation swept over her, Marinette noted that it felt very different from normal. As the light of the transformation died, she shifted, trying to place what felt so strange. For one thing, she felt stronger, her soreness disappearing for the moment. You can use all of our powers, and you have our combined strength, too, Tiki's voice whispered to her in her mind. Warmth surged through her, giving the courage to open her eyes, and she nearly jumped out of her skin as she saw a person standing off to the side of her. She twisted towards them, hands coming up, only to realize that it was her reflection in a mirror. Who in the heck puts a mirror on a rooftop exit? She muttered, feeling slightly embarrassed by her knee-jerk reaction. Having night vision was actually really cool, though, and curious, she took a step closer, while eyeing the changes to her costume. Ears adorned her hair, and a petite bell hung around her neck. Her gloves now ended in claws, and she could feel a difference in traction of her clawed shoes. She couldn't really make out the colors very well, even with the night vision, but she could tell that her normal spots mostly covered her body, except where they swirled to what she assumed was solid black, at her hands, feet, neck, and belt. Reaching behind at the small of her back, she discovered Chat's baton, as well as a tail to her amusement. Her yo-yo hung in its normal position at her side. I am so glad that Plants don't use cameras, Marinette muttered, thinking of how Isla would be having a field day if she saw her like this. Turning away from her reflection, she slowly cracked the door open to the roof, alert for any incoming attacks or stagnant vines. Seeing neither, she slid out the door on silent feet and started her run over the rooftops towards where she would hoped would be the final battle between her and Marigold. It took almost an hour of careful progress to make her way back to the tree where she and Chad had figured Marigold's main body was. The tree was still slowly repairing itself, and Lady Cat marveled at how powerful Cataclysm really was. Knowing what she needed to do, Lady Cat made her way across to the nearby metro station and moved headlong into the darkness. Once there, the darkness of the tunnel really enveloped Lady Cat, and she found that even with the night vision, she could hardly see. She traveled past cocoon ticket stands and jumped the gates before moving further down into the metro as she searched for her quarry. Time was lost to the darkness, and it was only Plag's and Tiki's voice whispering to her in her mind that kept her from totally freaking out. Cocoons were everywhere down here, and they all gave off an eerie light that actually allowed her to see just barely able her to see the people within. It actually made her feel as if she was being constantly watched, and to be honest, it set her nerves horribly on edge. By the time she was used to the strange glow, she also began to notice the overwhelming quiet that the tunnels had. The silence made her anticipation that much worse, because Lady Cat was used to these places being loud and bustling with lots of people as they went about their day. "Marinette, it's okay. These people won't have any negative effects from being cocooned. Once you release Lucky Charm, everything will go back to normal," Tiki whispered, her voice giving Lady Cat strength. "Yeah, but can we hurry? Co-transforming is making way more energy than I thought it would," Plag complained, as Lady Cat hid a smile and Tiki told him to quit whining. Eventually, a different light source began to filter in from somewhere, and she moved forward. Lady Cat began to have to watch where she stepped. Vines crisscrossed the floor, and as she turned the corner, Lady Cat froze, awed by the sight in front of her. A single clear teardrop-shaped bulb glowed in the darkness. The roots that sprang from all around the top of the bulb were driving into the roof and covering almost all available space. A little girl hung in the center of the clear bulb, curled on in on herself, looking similar to an orange and yellow pom-pom. Green accented gloves and boots decorated her hands and feet, and she was clutching what appeared to be a single black daisy flower. Lady Cat didn't know how, but she could just tell that the akuma was in the flower. Target acquired, she moved forward, ready to sling her yo-yo out the moment she came into range. Suddenly, though, at the worst possible time, the miraculous on her finger beeped, signifying the start to the countdown. "Oops," Plag whispered in her mind, as Marigold's eyes snapped open, and her body twisted towards her. "Bad kitty!" she shrieked, and the walls came to life. "Damn it!" Lady Cat hissed, as she tried to dodge while getting ever closer to the little girl's body. Spinning her yo-yo, she wielded it like a weed whacker, slashing through plants, roots, and anything else that got into her way. She made little headway, though. For every 2 steps Lady Cat took forward, she had to leap one back to avoid some blow. After a minute of little to no progress, she managed to look up to find Marigold eyeing her strangely. "Your name is Mary, right?" Lady Cat shouted, her voice echoing in the open space. Marigold flinched before yelling, "My name is Marigold!" Throwing herself sideways, spiked vines swiftly followed, and Lady Cat yelled back, "No, it's not! Your mom named you Mary, not Marigold!" The vines froze inches from her body, and Lady Cat gingerly slid backwards before picking herself up off the ground, watching the child the entire time. "Mary, you need to calm down. I don't know what happened to make you do this, but you need to stop," she managed, panting for air. Marigold's face scrunched. "Those mean boys broke my mommy's flower. I was bringing it to her in the hospital to help her feel better, and they broke it." Her last few words came out as a scream, and the vines around Lady Cat twisted, some of them growing wicked-looking thorns. Lady Cat tensed, but they didn't attack. Yet. Well, those boys ought to get a spanking, but why did you attack all of Paris? Lady Cat asked, and the little girl looked up at her blankly. The butterfly man said he'd help me make a garden, so my mommy could see it from her window. That's why I was growing the tree, but then the bad kitty poisoned it. Her eyes flashed suddenly, and Lady Cat could make out a purple moth-like mask surrounding her face. Mary, don't listen to the butterfly man. He's a bad guy, and he's using you, Lady Cat cried, taking several steps towards her in desperation. Bad kitty! Marigold screamed, and Ladybug knew that she had lost her again. The ground around her shook, and a slew of roots plummeted towards her from the roof, acting as if they were going to skewer her. Part of the roof dropped down with them, and Lady Cat sprinted forward, dodging debris as it rained down. Her plan was shot, and as the earth above her groaned, Lady Cat knew that she had to get out of this hole if she wanted to survive this battle. Realizing that she was going to have to retreat again, Lady Cat cursed and twisted over a hammer-shaped root that was trying to squash her. Drawing Chat's staff from the small of her back, she elongated it, sending her soaring straight up into the sky, where she could just make out the faintest bit of moonlight. About halfway up, the vines blindsided her, ripping the staff from her hands and sending her smashing back into the ground. Rolling swiftly to the side to avoid another thorny attack, she fetched up against the bulb-like pod that Mary was hiding in. Hello, kitty, Marigold said, and Lady Cat bounced to all fours, resisting the urge to hiss at her as her hair, torn loose from its normal pigtails, literally stood on end. Vines slithered like snakes towards her, and Lady Cat jumped at the pod, sinking her claws into the membranous surface as she desperately tried to climb. A crazy plan clicked into place, and she desperately hoped she had the energy to do it. If she could use Cataclysm on the base of the root system, she hoped that it might curb Marigold's power, enough that she could get the akuma-sized flower away from her. Seeing the vines rapidly closing in on her position, Lady Cat launched herself at the root base, crying, "Cat!" only to be cut off with a scream. Thorny vines slashed into her legs, halting her midair. Her upper body slammed back into the bulb's surface as her momentum instantly halted, and she flipped over, slashing at the vines with her claws. They loosened for a brief second, even as she tried to twist out of their grip, more swarming to join them as they bit into her. They pinned her arms and leg to one side. Thorns dug deep into her flesh, and Lady Cat cried out again, feeling the venom enter her system. With a shudder that caused the thorns to dig deeper, Lady Cat realized that her time was now extraordinarily limited. The thorns hurt, though, and as the vines squeezed tighter, desperation filled her. "Stop! Please!" Lady Cat wailed, and all at once the thorns drew back, withdrawing into the vines as she was suddenly shoved forward into the bulb. Marigold hovered before her, a small frown on her tiny face. She reached forward and Lady Cat flinched back as she pressed a small hand to her cheek. "You're crying," Marigold stated. It hurts," Lady Cat answered, and even though one arm was free and the stupid akuma-sized flower was within reach, she found that she simply didn't have the strength to take it from the child. Marigold's hand dropped to her side, and to Lady Cat's shock, tears filled her tiny eyes. "I didn't want to hurt you, but marigolds are known for their misery." Lady Cat realized that the girl was talking about the meaning of flowers, and a swell of pity surged through her. "You know, marigolds are also known for passion and creativity," she countered. Marigold looked her in the eyes as Hawkmoth's flat mask showed up around her face once more. "The butterfly man wants this The miraculous," Lady Cat whispered, helping her out, and Marigold nodded. Lady Cat didn't know what to say, what to do. She could feel that they were at a crossroads, that things were about to tip past the point of no return. Usually, she would use her lucky charm when she felt like this, but with one arm pinned, she didn't know what to do. Suddenly, as if simply thinking the words invoked it, the world grayed out. Marigold flashed polka-dotted, and then her own hand flashed polka-dotted, and with a sudden clarity, she remembered the photograph. "Mary, is this what you want?" Lady Cat asked, her voice soft. To her surprise, Marigold shook her head. I want my mommy, she whimpered, even as the mask reappeared brighter this time, and the vines tightened around Lady Cat, making her gasp in pain. The butterfly man's yelling at me. Ignoring the pain, Lady Cat moved slowly, pulling the photo free of her pinned glove, and with her free hand, she held it out to the child. I'll bring you to your mom if you want. Abandoning the black daisy for the photo, Marigold clutched the photo tight, tears spilling down her tiny cheeks, and the vines around Lady Cat slowly unraveled, letting her float freely in the bulb. I just wanted to grow my mommy a garden, Marigold said, as she looked up at Lady Cat, the fear and sorrow evident in her eyes. Lady Cat held out her arms. It's okay, sweetheart. Just come here, and I'll help you fix things. Hawkmoth's mask flickered around Marigold's face, and she glanced back at the daisy that hung in within arm's reach. Then, forsaking the daisy completely, Marigold rushed into Lady Cat's arms with a sob, and Lady Cat barely withheld a groan of pain as she realized that more than one rib was just bruised. As soon as the child made contact with her, Lady Cat realized that she could hear Hawkmoth's voice in the same eerie way she could hear the Kwamis. No, you stupid, ignorant child! Get me the miraculous! He screamed. How dare you yell at a child, you nasty man! Pick on someone your own size! Lady Cat yelled back, and there was a stunned moment of silence. You can hear me, he whispered, and Lady Cat shivered at the tone, sensing longing in his voice. Yes, I can, and this girl is no longer your pawn. If you dare send another akuma to attack a child again, I swear I will hunt you down and tear you to shreds. You have lost, Lady Cat hissed, her voice laced with venom. Chad's Miraculous beeped a final warning, so in the next instant, she lunged forward and snatched the blackened daisy up. No! Hawkmoth roared uselessly, and without a second thought, Lady Cat cried, Cataclysm! Turning the plant to ash. Energy spent, Chat's sides of the transformation came undone, instantly reverting her back to plain old Ladybug. Marigold's transformation came undone as well, and she turned in her arms as Ladybug opened her hand, allowing the black butterfly to wiggle out of a tiny daisied sprout in her palm. My plant! Mary cried, snatching the sprout from her palm, and Ladybug let her, for she had something far more important to take care of. As their feet touched down to earth, Ladybug slung out her yo-yo at the akuma, catching it and purifying it once. Can I see? Mary asked, back to a normal, curious little 6-year-old, as she tried to eye Ladybug's yo-yo. With a smile, Ladybug lowered it to eye level, then pressed it in the center, allowing the purified butterfly to escape. Bye-bye, little butterfly, Mary giggled, then yawned hugely as she reached up with her free hand to swipe at her eyes. I need to go plant my sprout, she said, and wandered forward to where a small backpack and a pot that said For Mommy in bright letters on it lay. Once Mary was preoccupied, Ladybug sat down hard. I didn't even notice those were there, she whispered, then jumped as Plag said softly, You were a little distracted by the swarming vines of doom. I'm not surprised you didn't notice it. You're pretty beat up as well. Shouldn't you release Lucky Charm so that everything can go back to normal? I can't yet, Ladybug said. I promised Mary that I would take her to the mom in the hospital. And besides, I really don't want Chat to wake up alone, she whispered, even as Tiki asked the same thing Plag did. Plag blinked slowly, then sighed. You kids are perfectly ridiculous sometimes, he huffed, before settling on top of her head. Ladybug rolled her eyes. Now I know where Chat gets it, she muttered, then took stock of her injuries. The thorns had pierced her body all over, although most of them were small puncture wounds, and all of them had almost already stopped bleeding, causing her red suit to be slightly darker in multiple areas. Cuts littered her costume, while countless bruises were already making themselves known. Her ribs hurt the worst, though, and she was pretty sure that at least one of them was broken. But all in all, she knew that once she released Lucky Charm, her injuries would heal. Knowing that made it a little easier to bear the pain, as she got to her feet before walking over to where Mary had just finished repotting her sprout. "Mary, it's time to go," Ladybug said, holding out a hand. "Okay, Ladybug. I like your hair down. It's really pretty," Mary answered, holding on tight to her little pot as she placed her other hand in Ladybug's. Now that there were no murderous vines to avoid, it didn't take as long as Ladybug feared it would to bring Mary to the hospital where her mother was. Less than halfway there, Mary had been practically asleep on her feet, and Ladybug picked her up, ignoring the flare of rib pain to carry her the rest of the way. When Ladybug walked through the doors of the hospital, though, all hell had broken loose. It was quite a sight for people even used to akuma fights to witness Ladybug waltz through the doors, bloody, disheveled, and carrying a child. She was bombarded with questions, and doctors swarmed her because it was painfully obvious that she was injured. Ladybug had refused medical treatment, refused to sit down, and flat out refused to hand the sleeping Mary over. After arguing with a man in charge for several minutes, she was finally brought to Mary's mother's room, where her husband sat as well next to the bed. They were overjoyed to have their daughter back, and they thanked Ladybug profusely for saving her, even though she didn't tell them that Mary had been the cause of the akuma attack. Ladybug had grinned at the loving family, even as her Miraculous beeped, letting her know that time was once again running out. After reclaiming the Lucky Charm photo, she left via window, not wanting to get caught up in the crowd that was swiftly forming outside the door. Plag joined her as she hit the rooftops running, happy to note that the rooftop she had left Adrian at was far closer to the hospital than she had realized. "You really need to rest, Marinette," Tiki whispered in her mind as she slipped on a loose shingle and almost stumbled, nearly crashing headfirst into a wall. "I will. We're almost there," Ladybug answered, her voice coming in a pained gasp as she bounced over the wall, her ribs sending out a flare of pain for her troubles. "Tiki, stop distracting her," Plag moaned. Since Ladybug needed her hands free to use her yo-yo, he was desperately clinging to her hair as she ran. "I'm so gonna make him eat those words," Tiki grumbled, making Ladybug giggle helplessly, her pounding footsteps echoing the beats of her heart. She made it with a dot to spare, skidding to a halt before Adrian's cocoon. For a moment, she could only gasp for air, eyeing the sky as it slowly started to change colors with the rising dawn. "Miraculous cleanse!" she shouted, her voice haggard as she tossed the photo up into the air, where it burst like fireworks. A branch swarmed around her, healing her, before swarming around Adrian, leaving him plantless and whole, his back against the wall. A moment later, he opened his eyes, blinking and shaking his head. He spotted her in an instant. "I knew you could do it, m'lady," he said, a very chat-like grin lighting up his face. Ladybug trembled at his words, a surge of warmth momentarily replacing the exhaustion. She wanted to move forward, wanted to speak, but as the exhaustion swept back over her, it was all she could do to stay standing. "Marinette, you've overreached yourself!" Tiki cried in her mind, as Plag plastered himself to the side of Adrian's face, whispering rapidly in his ear. Adrian's head jerked up sharply, and, seeming to truly take in her appearance, he scrambled to his feet, looking very concerned in the ever-brightening morning. He took a step forward, one hand reaching out towards her, and Ladybug smiled. Her whole body felt ridiculously heavy, and her eyes slowly started to close. "You're okay," Ladybug managed finally, a small smile flitting across her lips. Then, as her transformation wore off in a flash of pink light, she pitched forward in a dead faint. The first thing that Marinette noticed was that she was warm, and then she realized she wasn't in her room. She sat up suddenly, sending Tiki flying with a surprised squeak. Recovering midair, the Kwami floated back to her, crying, "Marinette, you're awake!" A small crash echoed off to her right, and suddenly Adrian appeared, skidding to a halt in his socks. With no warning at all, he rushed to her side and threw his arms around her, pulling her tight against him. "You're awake! Thank goodness you're awake! I was so worried, but Tiki said that all you needed was sleep, so I brought you here, and you've been asleep for hours, but I—" He trailed off, and Marinette thought her heart would burst. Adrian was hugging her. He was hugging her! Instantly, she felt herself go beet red, and for a moment she thought that she would combust. Something moved, squeaking between them, and Adrian pulled back, enough to allow a slightly squished Tiki to get free. He blinked, taking in Marinette's bright red features, and blushed himself, letting her go instantly. Sorry, he stuttered, pulling back even further. Marinette knew that she should say something. Anything. But in all honesty, words had forsaken her. Instead, in a bold move of her own, she reached up to grab Adrian's shirt front and pulled him to her, pressing a kiss to his lips. His arms went around her again, one hand trailing up to grip the back of her neck, and he tilted his head, deepening the kiss. After a moment they parted again, and gazed into each other's eyes, both speaking at the same time. "Don't you ever do that to me again!" They both blinked in surprise, then matching grins spread over their faces, and they started to laugh, clinging to each other as they did. It took them a while, but once they finally calmed down, the questions began, and Marinette asked hers first. "Okay, how long have I been out? And how did we get here? Did everything go back to normal? Where is here, by the way? And where's my stuff?" Adrian lifted her little purse from the floor and handed it to her as he answered. "About 6 hours, and I carried you here. We're at a small apartment complex that my father owns. I didn't want to show up at yours or my house with you unconscious in my arms, so I came here. It was closer anyways. Things are basically back to normal, but you're going to be even more popular now, milady." "Or should it be princess?" he asked, cocking his head questioningly at her. Marinette blushed. "Save the my lady stuff for Ladybug, kitty," she answered, and Adrian grinned. "Princess it is, then," he crowed. Then, what he said first sank in, and Marinette frowned. Why am I going to be more popular now?" she asked, and Adrian gave her a slightly chagrined look. Well, I think those cocoons were how Marigold could see the world outside the bowl that she was hiding in. Basically, everyone who was in the cocoons saw your entire battle underground, and saw how you comforted her. You were incredible," he breathed, giving her an odd look, and he brushed some of the stray hairs back behind her ears. Marinette, however, winced. "Wait, does that mean everyone knows who I am?" Adrian shook his head. "No, my cocoon hadn't finished forming yet, that first time, and you had already undone all of Marigold's work with the Miraculous Cleanse, with the second time, so no one saw your transformations." Marinette let a breath out that she'd been holding, and she flopped backwards onto the bed. "That's a relief," she managed, then yawned. She was still tired. No, scratch that. She was still exhausted, and she wondered if Adrian felt the same way. "Although, I have to say, I love seeing you with my ears and bell on. Then, with your hair being down—" Adrian purred, causing Marinette to splutter and sit back up. "It wasn't by choice, you silly cat," she cried, then looked down, realizing that she still wore his Miraculous. "Why didn't you take your ring back?" she asked, moving to slip it off of her finger. Adrian watched her, a slightly sad smile edging its way across his features. I couldn't bear to take it back. Not after what I asked of you in the first place. I guess I figured that as long as you wore it—" He broke off and looked away, slowly standing up. Marinette watched him as he slowly moved away from her. She took in his slumped shoulders and the way his hands slowly clenched into fists, and she knew that Adrian needed her. She swung her legs off the edge of the bed and stood, albeit a little shakily. Quietly, Marinette moved up behind him, and she buried her face into his back, wrapping her arms around the middle. "You are the bravest, dumbest person," Adrian aggressed, "and I love you. You saved me, and because of your trust in me, I didn't give up. I know why you told me to run, and I really am sorry that I slapped you, but you gave me the courage to fight. Do you not see that?" He stiffened at her words, and then slowly, with one hand, she pressed his ring into his hand, curling his fingers around it. Adrian wrapped his free hand around the arm that encircled his waist, and took a deep breath. "Can I turn around?" he asked, and Marinette shook her head against his back, feeling horribly embarrassed. "Please, Marinette, I want to kiss you," Adrian whispered. Marinette felt herself flush, and slowly she loosened her grip so that he could turn in her arms. She looked up at him and was startled to see tears in his eyes. Before she could say anything about it, though, he pulled her into a kiss that left her breathless, and once he pulled away, he slipped his ring back onto his finger. "Wow," Marinette murmured, clinging to him as her wobbly legs wouldn't give out. "If I knew that this is what kissing was going to be like, I don't think I ever could have spoken to you." "Huh?" Adrian asked. Marinette blushed. I've kind of had a crush on you for a long time, and that's why I didn't want to date you as Chat. It's also why I was always so clumsy and stuttery around you." Adrian blinked a long, slow cat-like blink, and then began to laugh. "It's not funny," Marinette cried, shoving him in the chest, and Adrian laughed even harder, as he grabbed her hands and bringing them up to his lips. "Oh, my dear princess, how right you are. It's not funny, it's hilarious. Don't you see?" he asked her, looking at her, seeing her utterly confused look in her gorgeous blue eyes. "We've been in love with each other this entire time, but we didn't know it was us that we were in love with." Suddenly, Marinette did see what he was talking about, and together they collapsed into a pile of giggles. "I don't mean to interrupt this your sickeningly sweet, gooey, cutesy moment, but can we please get something to eat?" Plag demanded, flying into the air between them. "Plag, I told you not to interrupt them!" Kiki squealed, grabbing hold of him and shaking him none too gently. With matching grins plastered onto their faces, Adrian and Marinette separated their qualmies. "So, Marinette, I think this is a perfect time to ask you out on a date, yes?" Adrian asked, keeping his hands cupped around Plag so that he couldn't escape. "You did not just use a cat pun to ask me out, did you?" Marinette groaned, rolling her eyes heavenward. "Perhaps," Adrian answered, cackling, even as she shoved him. They left the apartment together, and they stopped by Marinette's house to check in on her parents. Marinette actually felt bad leaving Adrian her parents' company to go take a shower, but she really needed it. By the time she got out and had changed, she found that her parents had let him use their bathroom to freshen up as well. He pouted a little when he saw that she had placed her hair back into its normal pigtails. "I really like it when your hair is down and all wild and curled about your face," he whispered, as they started to leave. Marinette smiled and leaned her head against his shoulder. "Yeah, but it gets in my face too much when I run around," she answered, and although he did see her point, Adrian pouted. "I didn't get to play with it, though," he muttered with a sigh, and Marinette paused mid-step to reach up and pull one of the ties from her hair. With a grin, Adrian had his hands in the other before she had a chance to pull it out, and then he darted back holding the tie up so that she could see it. "Hey, give that back," Marinette called, and Adrian smiled wildly. "Only if you think you can catch me," he answered, and he darted out the bakery door. Laughing, Marinette swiftly followed, and after she caught him, they did in fact go on a date, since school that day was cancelled. They had to part company later, though, so that Adrian could answer his father's summons, and Marinette could answer Isla's, but they promised to meet back up later that night for patrol. The moment Isla opened her door to the home, she had started chattering and squealing as she told Marinette what had happened to her on the way to school. Marinette knew that Isla could be over-enthusiastic when it came to Ladybug, but this time she had been way over the top. Isla had been ecstatic to tell Marinette all about witnessing Lady Cat's, as she called that particular transformation, fierce battle with Marigold. Marinette had pretended that she had been cocooned as well, so that it didn't seem odd that she knew the dirty details about the battle. Then Isla had dropped the bomb on her. With Nino's help, they had hacked into the Metro's cameras, and to their absolute delight, they had found Lady Cat's entire fight captured on film. They were in the process of editing it so that it was one continuous floating fight scene, when Marinette had arrived. Marinette watched the film that they had with a mixture of dread and awe surging through her. On one hand, the fight really was an incredible thing to watch as she dodged, weaved, and fought against insurmountable odds. However, she could feel every blow she watched herself take, and she was glad when Isla had finally turned it off. The video left a strange taste in her mind, because she knew that when she was called on, she would fight again. And while she had been lucky this time, it wouldn't always be the case. Regardless of the risk to her own life, though, she would always answer that call, and she knew that someone instinctively that Adrian felt the same way. Exhausted, she had left Isla to her overeager editing and gone home to her parents for a nap, knowing that in a few short hours she would be back on patrol as Ladybug. The night air was cool and humid as Ladybug darted over the rooftops on her way to meet up with Chat. They still had a lot to discuss, but she could feel that deep within her bones that between them, everything would work out okay. She wasn't sure how they were going to reveal their new dating status to their friends, but Ladybug figured that they could talk about it so that they had a believable single story to tell. Soon, a shadow split away from the chimney, and moments later, Chat fell into step behind her. "You're looking as feline as ever, milady," Chat said, as they came to a halt on the rooftop of an abandoned building. Knowing the darkness hid them well, Ladybug reached out and wrapped him in a hug. "I am so very glad to see you, Chat," she whispered, and Chat hugged her back, careful that the claws didn't prick her skin. "Clag told me everything," he said, squeezing her gently. Ladybug sighed into his chest, holding him a moment longer, before gently Chat pulled away. She stared at him, feeling a little bit confused, as he took a step back and reached into his pocket. I have something for you," Chat said. "I mean, I really didn't do the whole asking thing out properly, and we kind of already ruined the whole first kiss, but I really am looking forward to truly getting to know you, and I just wanted to give you something since, I can't give you my Miraculous." Ladybug blinked, unsure of where he was going with this, but then he opened up his hand to reveal a ring. The band was made of a dark metal that was intricately woven and detailed, so that it looked like a cat stretched out. In the center of the front, where the front and back paws met, was a single round ruby that had black imperfections in it, making it seem as if the stone itself had spots. Ladybug gasped, stunned at the ring's beauty, and looked at him. "How did... Chat, I can't accept that," she managed, and Chat lifted her hand, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I had it made because I hoped that one day my lady would fall for me," he purred, and Ladybug yanked back her hand, glaring at him. Chat laughed and recaptured her hand again. "I'm joking, my lady. Well, kind of. I actually had a commission for you for Christmas, but it didn't get finished on time, and then I sort of chickened out," he amended, making her chuckle. Gently, he slid the ring onto her finger where it fit perfectly, and Ladybug stared at the ring, feeling a bit overwhelmed. "It's heavy," Ladybug whispered. Chat brushed a gentle hand over her cheek, drawing her gaze back up to him. "That's because it carries my heart." Ladybug's eyes filled with tears, his voice resonating deep within her. "I will never take it off. You're stuck forever with me now." Chat grinned, his bright green eyes filled with joy. "Forever and ever? I can't wait, milady." Then, wrapped in each other's arms under the warm Parisian night sky, they sealed the promise with a kiss.